final speaker for this conference. I'd like to first thank our sponsors, Lexis Thomson Reuters and the Continuing Education of the Bar CEB for their support for this entire 4-day conference, and also to thank Delia for putting this all together. I think we all agree it's been a great couple of weeks. So with that, I will introduce our next speaker, Scott Rechtschaffen. Sorry, I've been practicing, but I messed up. For the coming disruption of legal services, the role of knowledge professionals and technology. As Littler's Chief Knowledge Officer, Scott leads the firm's effort to provide innovative client services by integrating new technologies and work processes. He was a key player in the development of the award-winning Littler CaseSmart and Littler Edge, and is the co-founder of Compliance HR, an innovative joint venture launched in 2015 by Littler and Neotologic. In 2018, Scott was appointed as an adjunct professor at Cornell Law School, where he teaches legal technology at the New York City Tech campus. For his outstanding achievements in the field of knowledge management, Scott received the Distinguished Peer Award as KM Champion of the Year by ILTA, was named to the Fast Case 50, and was introduced as a fellow in the College of Law Practice Management. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Give me just a moment. Here we go. Okay, everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Well, everybody's on mute, I guess, so I'm just going to assume you can.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you for inviting me. I am the Chief Knowledge Officer, as Maribel just explained. I've been doing this for a very long time. I have my job is really pretty easy because I have a fabulous team, including an amazing research staff. I've been in charge of the firm's research services for maybe a decade or more, and the team really makes me look good. Let me say from the outset, despite this ominous sounding title, I'm not a prophet of doom and gloom. I believe the best days of the legal profession are ahead of us, and I don't believe we're going to all be replaced by robots. A lot of my partners, whenever they hear me talk, they say, uh-oh, here comes, Mr. Doom and Gloom, and here come the robots. I'm not a proponent of that point of view. I think the future is very bright. And however, the future is going to be very different. The way we do things today, the way we've done them for the last 100 years, is not the way we're going to be doing them in the future. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. I want to start out with concepts of innovation. I hope you all, this is a picture of Clayton Christensen, who passed away not too long ago. He was a professor at Harvard and wrote an amazing book, must be 30 years ago, called The Innovator's Dilemma, where he looked at the chip industry and why companies that were well aware of the changes going on around them couldn't adopt. And he came up with this concept for innovation of sustainable versus disruptive innovation. And the classic explanation of that is sustainable is innovation that makes things more efficient, makes us more productive, makes us do things better. Disruptive innovation is something that completely changes the way things are done. The classic example is the line Henry Ford is attributed to have said, which is, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Well, faster horses, that would have been sustainable innovation. The car was disruptive innovation. In the law, in my class at Cornell Tech, I always ask, what is the most important innovation in the legal profession? And I get all, legal research, online legal research, the internet. And I say, in my opinion, it's the typewriter. In the late 1800s, the typewriters changed the look of the legal profession, because prior to that, most law firms was one lawyer and a scrivener. And the scrivener's job was to make duplicate copies of the legal documents that the lawyer was creating. So you had one lawyer and one scrivener. That was a law firm. With the invention of the typewriter, you could now use carbon paper. You didn't need the Scrivener. But you did need someone to work the typewriters. And interestingly, this was around the time of the suffragette movement, and you saw an influx of women into the workplace. Women wanted to work, and office environments seemed more genteel than a factory. And also it was perceived that typewriters needed a delicate touch. So all of a sudden you had women flooding in. Also now a person running a typewriter could serve multiple attorneys because of the increase in efficiency. There are many, many ways the typewriter completely changed the legal industry. And of course, there are more modern advances, and we'll talk about some of those. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to use a lot of historical references here. I was a history major. Classic case of disruptive innovation. This is a chart that shows the production of sperm whale oil in the 1800s. And sperm whale oil was used to light and heat homes. And then in 1852, Colonel E.L. Drake drills a well in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and up comes kerosene, which completely eliminated the need for sperm whale oil. And it was much cheaper. A lot of people give John D. Rockefeller credit for this. He didn't drill the hole, but he developed the means of distribution and production and created Standard Oil. So all of a sudden, the whaling captains retreated to their homes in Rhode Island, and the need for sperm whale oil disappeared. Interestingly, Rockefeller and Standard Oil were themselves disrupted because the need for kerosene to light homes was eliminated by Thomas Edison and electrification. So all of a sudden, his business was disrupted. Fortunately, his chemist said, you know, there's this byproduct of kerosene that we've been throwing away called gasoline, and we think it would be really good in those engines that our old friend Henry Ford were creating. So classic disruption. More recently, let's try this. This is the stock price of Blockbuster, showing the day, the month when Netflix launched its IPO, and the stock price of Blockbuster plummeted. And this is really interesting because, you know, the examples abound. You know, Sears, retail, replaced by Amazon, Blockbuster, Netflix, Kodak, Instagram. You know, the one thing to keep in mind is that it's not the technology that causes the disruption. You know, Amazon was sending packages by mail, you know, and from big warehouses. Wasn't the technology that allowed them to dominate. Similarly, Netflix. Initially, Netflix sent their DVDs by the mail. You know, the thing Benjamin Franklin started. Nothing revolutionary about the technology. You know, digital photography. Kodak invented digital photography. And yet, in I think it was 2012, when Kodak, which its height had 150,000 employees around the world, the year it declared bankruptcy, Instagram was valued at $1 billion with only 13 employees. It's not the technology, it's the business model. The problem Sears faced was all of this real estate. It had all of its real estate and all of these stores and all of these employees, and they could not change their business model. Same thing with Blockbuster. Kodak, interestingly, Kodak said, yeah, we invented digital photography, but that's for tourists on vacation. Professionals will never use digital photography. And they were making their money selling film and paper and chemicals to professional photographers. They couldn't change their business model. The other thing that causes innovation is waves of innovation that cause disruption. And throughout history, we've seen several of these waves, and we're in one right now. You know, the first was the first industrial revolution. Steam power allowed us to create factories, mass production. Second industrial revolution, electrification, the internal combustion engine, again, extended. And these waves usually last about 100 years. They're not overnight. The impact is not felt overnight. The third industrial revolution, computers, automation, technology. This is the wave we are currently in, and we've been in it since, people argue about the dates. I put it at about 1980. but we're still in this wave of the third industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution has arrived. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, data analytics, biotechnology, the Internet of Things. There's this new term, the Internet of Everything. I can't talk about the impact. Invite me back in 20 years and maybe I'll be able to opine about the impact of this, but we are in the early days of this fourth industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution is where we are, and we're several decades into it. You know, I'm always asked, how do I explain these changes to our attorneys? You know, do I talk about Clayton Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma? Do I talk about Blockbuster and do I talk about Netflix? No, I talk about our clients. And I say to our lawyers, how many of you would get on a plane if you couldn't buy your ticket online? How many of you would put money in a bank if you couldn't pay your bills online? How many of you would go to a ball game if you actually had to go down to the box office and wait online to buy a ticket? You wouldn't. You do everything online. You talk to your friends online. You get your news online. You watch your stocks online. You make your restaurant reservations online. And you know what? Your clients do too. And it's not going to be sufficient for you to say to your client, hey, I'm online. I can send you an email or go visit my website. The whole world has been digitally transformed. And now COVID has only accelerated that digital transformation. It's no longer acceptable to say, I can continue doing things the way I've always done them. It just isn't so. And COVID has really reinforced this and given us an enormous opportunity. Now is a great time to innovate in the legal space because our lawyers, they've been working from home and they can do it. And they can do their bills online using a stylus and a laptop. You know, if you had proposed that 2 years ago, they would have said, you're crazy. All sorts of innovations that we've been able to make in the last year because of necessity. As I said, disruption is not about whether it's sustainable or disruptive. Innovation is not about the technology, it's about the business model. And that's what we're seeing right now in the legal profession, is a major change in the way legal services are delivered, the business models. Our clients, whether they're in-house counsel or individuals, consumers, they now have alternatives. Law firms no longer rule the roost. We are no longer the kings and queens of our industry. There are alternatives. The alternative legal service providers who now want to be called legal companies. They don't like ALSP anymore. They want to be legal companies. And this chart's a couple years old. I would say now the total is probably somewhere between 20 and 30 billion. And you might say, well, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the total size of the legal marketplace. And I'll admit that, but 10 or 15 years ago, this chart didn't exist. That 20-30 billion dollars, that was money that was going to law firms. And now it's not. And the trend lines are only increasing for more and more business to go to these alternative legal service providers. The names are very well known. I was on a panel not too recently with Elevate. I mean, Elevate is now doing work directly for law firms. It's doing work for legal departments. They're becoming pervasive. Integrion, Pangea, they've been around for quite a while. These are now very well-established businesses that do the blocking and tackling. They don't want to handle, you know, they don't expect to be handling high-end complex litigation, but they're going to handle the e-discovery involved. They're going to handle basic blocking and tackling of the litigation process. Same with transactional contract management systems. This is their sweet spot. We're now seeing gig economy lawyers emerge. Axiom, if Axiom were a law firm, I think it'd be in the Am Law 100 by revenue, and number of lawyers. If not, certainly the Am Law 200. Lawyers on demand. This has become a very popular way for it, particularly in-house legal departments, to staff their work. Of course, the Big Four are getting in the game. You know, clearly outside the United States, they are among the biggest employers of lawyers in the world. And you know, they will eventually get to the United States. Certainly the big four have been doing employee benefits work for many, many years, and other work that's quasi legal. I mean, if you think about it, isn't preparing someone's tax returns, taking a shoebox full of information and applying the Internal Revenue Code to it, isn't that legal work? I mean, technically it's not, because years and years ago, the Internal Revenue Code was rewritten so to specifically say it wasn't legal work and accountants could do it. But that's they've been doing legal tasks for years, and they want to do the blocking and tackling. Your old friends who I know you all know well, and sponsors of this conference, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis, they're very heavily involved in offering alternative ways of delivering legal services, both in terms of information, but also in terms of process, and particularly data analytics, and the things that firms probably aren't going to do on their own. And of course, document automation and platforms like Practical Law Company and HighQ. Really impressive the way they've moved beyond what was simply owning a proprietary database to now being more full service in the needs of corporate departments and law firms. Even law firms are starting to have alternative ways of delivering legal services. Dentons has Next Law Labs, which is an incubator. Fenwick has Flex by Fenwick, which is a way of providing on-demand staffing. We have a joint venture called Compliance HR. Wilson Sonsini has a very exciting company called 650. Allen and Overy has Aosphere, which they've been doing Aosphere for 10 or 15 years. I always consider Allen and Overy to be one of the gold standards in online legal services. We have a product we deliver to our clients called Littler Edge, where clients can have online access to basically all our knowledge management resources, whether it's libraries of forms, government notices, 50 state surveys, treatises on 56 areas of law. We make it readily available to our clients. I want to, before I go here, just say one more thing. I talked earlier about sustainable disruption, sustainable innovation, and disruptive innovation. In my view, what I've just shown you is pretty much sustainable innovation. It's improving the efficiency, delivering the same services by different people in a different way. Do I think they're going to be more cost effective? The big four aren't known for bargain basement pricing. So they're going to take more and more work away from the law firms. They're going to do it more efficiently. They're going to staff cases better, but are clients going to pay less? I'm not sure. So all of these things, the alternative legal service providers, they're more efficient. They deploy technology much better. But again, they're not really changing the way legal services, they're changing who's delivering the services and how, but they're not changing the very nature of the delivery of legal services. What I think is potentially disruptive is the investment we're seeing in legal technology companies from the major players, the private equity and venture capitalists who built Silicon Valley. They're looking at the legal market and have been for the last couple of years. Why? Because we're an irrational market. We're just not economically well thought out. The business model is not a good one. So they've been looking, how can we disrupt the legal services? This is, by the way, $1.2 billion that was invested in legal tech companies in 2019. You would think in 2020, the investment would go down because of the pandemic. It did somewhat, but I was surprised. I haven't seen the final numbers. There was still quite a bit of activity. And recently we saw, just this past week, Clio, I think, raised over $100 million at a valuation of something like $1.8 billion. So it's continuing apace. And look at what we're talking about. This also is a few years old, but these are all legal tech companies that are chasing ways to deliver the services that law firms have always provided in new, unique ways. I think probably the most disruptive companies on this list are LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer. They are completely upending the way consumers obtain legal services. I mean, it's disruptive itself. The fact that someone is offering legal services to consumers. That's been a major gap in the whole legal industry for the last many, many years, despite Hyatt Legal Services and Jacoby and Myers, who were around 20 years ago, who tried to open storefront legal offices, never worked. Technology, new business models just may change that. So I think there's potential on this chart, and there are many companies I'm missing here that could really be disruptive. Okay, so how is this going to impact the future? How is this going to impact legal jobs? What does this mean for all of us? Let me go back to those past waves of innovation and their impact on jobs. So first industrial revolution, I'm sure you've heard of the Luddites. You know, nowadays when one of our partners, one of our attorneys is not particularly tech savvy, at least the people in my IT department call them Luddites. The Luddites, a lot of controversy as to who the Luddites actually were. Did they really exist? The legend is that they went around smashing the automated looms. They were weavers, and they were upset that the automated looms would take their jobs away and would deliver poor quality goods. Truth of the matter is, with the invention and rapid deployment of the automated looms, starting in England and then spreading out, the need for weavers increased incredibly. Why? Because prior to the automated loom, mostly the rich bought clothes. If you weren't rich, you typically made your own clothes, or if you did buy clothes, you didn't buy a lot. The working classes, the poor, had a very limited wardrobe, if you will. With the automated loom, clothes became more affordable and more readily available. And not only did you need more weavers to run the looms, you could now have more complicated patterns and use different dyes and all sorts of things that required creativity. And weavers were in demand. You know, same thing. Let's take the second industrial revolution. You know, we always hear, well, the car got rid of the blacksmiths and farriers and everybody else related to horse-drawn travel. Sure, it's true, but gave rise to people working in auto factories and parts plants and gas stations and parking garages and on and on and on, and building highways. Far more jobs were created because of the automobile than were ever displaced. Similarly, in the 1970s, when ATM machines were deployed, everybody said, well, there goes bank tellers. We won't need them anymore. Nonsense. We have more bank tellers today than we ever did. Why? Because the electronic systems that enabled ATMs allowed banks to open branches on every corner. You know, in the old days, when I was growing up, you know, there was one bank of each kind, you know, so, you know, Chase or Manufacturers Hanover, there was one bank, you know, for 5 miles. Now you can have a Chase Bank on every corner. And the tellers are not just counting cash. They're selling auto loans. They're helping clients with mortgages. They're doing higher end work and not just cashing, giving, counting change and giving cash and cashing checks. Much higher value work, but there are more bank tellers, and there are lots of examples of this. In the 1980s, the pilots union fought when the airlines wanted to get rid of the flight engineer in the cockpit. You used to have a pilot, co-pilot, and a flight engineer in every flight. Airlines wanted to get rid of the flight engineer, and the unions were upset about the loss of jobs. We have a demand for pilots right now. We need more pilots than ever. So technology always creates an opportunity. Now, there's a fierce debate as to whether the third industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution is really going to follow this pattern, or whether the nature of the change is so different that you know, people say the robots that will replace these guys on the auto line, someone's got to build the robots. Someone's got to design them. Someone's got to maintain them. Will there be enough of those jobs to make up for the loss? Too early to say. So this is a very healthy debate. I go back and forth on it. I'm not sure where I go, but I do not believe that these kinds of disruptions necessarily kill jobs. I think there's a more interesting recent analogy, and that's the medical profession. My father was a doctor, and in his office, there was him, the doctor, there was a nurse, and there was a receptionist, period. My father had his own x-ray machine. He would take x-rays. He would develop the x-rays. I always hated going into the developing room because it smelled terribly. He drew blood from his patients. I remember when I got into the front seat of his car, I'd have to be careful not to sit on the vials of blood he was delivering to the lab. I think if my father had had the time and the equipment, he would have done the blood analysis himself. He had been a chemist. He did everything. And even in the hospital setting, you had doctors, nurses, orderlies, maybe physical, you had a very limited range of people in the profession. And the doctors ruled the roost. They were the kings and queens. And everybody else was secondary. Look at who is delivering medical services today. I don't think you could go into a doctor's office now, a general practitioner, a family physician, and find an x-ray machine. They send you out to the x-ray lab where the technician and the radiologists do everything. They don't take blood anymore. They send you out to LabCorp, where there are trained phlebotomists who take your blood. The disintermediation of the medical industry has created all sorts of new jobs and new professions and new careers. And a lot of this is because the change in the medical industry and the economics that came about with managed care and the big corporations moving in, there was pressure to make medicine more efficient. Not necessarily better, but more efficient. So there was that cost pressure. But it has resulted in a wide range of new jobs and new careers. Are we going to see the disintermediation of the legal profession? I don't know. I mean, I do know that when I joined the legal profession in the early 80s, it was much like my father's world. There were the lawyers, there were, the shareholders and partners, there were the associates, there were the legal secretaries. And yes, we had file clerks and a receptionist and messengers. We used to employ our own messengers, and we had a couple of accounting people. But then over the years, we started adding on and coming up with new types of job positions within the firm. Oh, and I should mention, of course, we had librarians. Interestingly, in those days, librarians didn't do legal research. They managed the book collection. They put the pocket parts in. They helped you find things, but they didn't do the legal research. Now things have changed. Look at all the different jobs we have in the legal industry. And I think this will only accelerate. Now, I know in a lot of smaller and medium-sized firms, they haven't branched out into all of these different types of things. But even small and medium-sized firms have marketing departments, have finance and accounting departments, have legal research professionals, have lit support people and e-discovery attorneys. I think there's going to be a wealth of new jobs created in our industry. There are some, debates over the propriety of this. The lawyers are pushing back, saying no, only lawyers should be practicing law. These other people should stay away from delivering legal services. I don't think that works anymore. I really don't. I think we need to readjust the business model. If we don't readjust the business model, we're just going to give up more and more work to these other companies that can do it. And a lot of these various services, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance and accounting, application development, IT, there are outsourced solutions for this. And I'm not saying the only way to do is directly employ these, but they are an integral part of how we deliver legal services now and going forward in the future. So how can you prepare for your changing role in the legal industry? What can you do to make sure that you, as librarians and research professionals, are on top of your game and really making sure that you are that integral part of the way legal services are delivered in your law firm, in your legal department, wherever you happen to work? So I think the best thing to do is to adopt the best practices of the disruptors. Let's look out into the world and see the way the best of the companies out there do it. Make it simple for your users. This is the brilliance of Google. They don't have a complicated web page. Nobody needs training to use Google. Every time I hear we're going to adopt some new technology within our firm and we're going to have to put all the lawyers and everybody else through training, I say, well, then there's something wrong with the technology. We have to do things that are simple. One of the things we did, and some of you may have heard of this from Cynthia Brown or Allison Reeve or some of the other people at Littler, is we created something called the Knowledge Desk. I used to go to KM conferences. I still do go to KM conferences, but I used to hear all the time, attorneys are technophobic. If we were in a room together, I would ask you to raise your hands and tell me how many of you heard that. Attorneys just hate technology. And I would just hear that over and over again. And they would say, yeah, wait till the next generation of attorneys arrive. They'll really get the technology, the databases we deploy, and the portals we create, and all the cool tech toys that we're developing. They'll get it. And that always struck me as wrong, because if you're waiting for the next generation, you're ignoring the rainmakers and the litigators that are the stars of your firm right now. You're ignoring them. And I just kept thinking about it, and I said, it's not that they're technophobic. It's that the technology we give them at work is so much more complicated than the technology that they use at home, like Google. We don't have Google in law. And I said this at a conference not too long ago, and I got inundated with all these vendors sending me emails saying, we've invented Google for law. No, they haven't. The problem is our lawyers have to think, well, I need to find a sample document. Where do I go? Do I go to a practice group page on the intranet? Do I do an iManage or a NetDoc search? Do I just send out an all attorney email? They don't want to have to think. They want something as simple as Google. So we created something called the Knowledge Desk. And we basically said to our attorneys, your answer is here. We don't care what you need. We don't care if you need to know how to order business cards. We don't care if you need the leading cases on antitrust in name an industry. We don't care what you need. We will get the answer for you. And on the back end, the people staffing the Knowledge Desk, they're using the technology. They know which database to go to. They know which search tool to use. And it's such a simple premise. And I've had attorneys come up to me saying, this is the greatest thing, this is the greatest piece of technology you've ever deployed. And it's not really technology. Yes, we are using ServiceNow as a ticketing system to keep track of things. We have a brilliant staff that manages this. And, and we are going in the process of deploying robotic process automation to make some of the repetitive tasks more easy. But they love it. They don't have to think. They just, my favorite question of all time was someone saying, I'm flying in late to Pittsburgh for a deposition the next morning. Do you know of a good restaurant that stays open late? The answer was no, but I loved the question. And again, it's just such a simple, going back to this idea of it's not the technology, it's the business model. This was a business model with a value proposition that says, one-stop shop, whatever it is, we'll take care of it. First year we launched this, we had like 17,000 inquiries. Then it grew and grew. And in COVID year, I think we had something like 59,000 inquiries. And it's just been one of the best things we've ever did. Another example, anticipate what your users need. I have to explain these items in the middle. My son uses my Amazon account. So these are things he orders. And interestingly, Amazon is so good. I got an email from them yesterday. They found one of our books online. And I'm actually asking my team to research, was the original price of this $600, so it's a 2-cent discount, or was it less than that and somebody has marked it up? I don't know. But Amazon has this amazing ability to make recommendations that are spot on. We're not that good yet, but we send out, we're very proactive about alerting our attorneys in different practice groups to things we believe they're going to need to know. And how do we know what they're going to need to know? We're tracking things. We're tracking the requests. Our team watches the all attorney emails. Our team is part of the practice groups. This is really important. We have people on our team who are talking every day with the various practice groups and understanding their business and understanding what their client demands are and following and anticipating. I wish I could automate this too, but right now the human touch is so good. And we have attorneys who consider the knowledge management attorneys or our legal research professionals or our legal writers, to be part of the practice group. We can anticipate what the users need. Always consider user experience. Again, we tend to deploy technology that just can be a little too complicated for the users. They want simplicity, like the iPad. We came up with this COVID litigation tracker. We're not alone. I know a lot of firms have done this, which make it really easy for our clients to go in and see where the COVID cases, the COVID litigation, where it's taking place, what kinds of litigation we're seeing. And we make it easier. You can click on a state and up will come statistics for that state. You can look at just the federal cases. You can sort by industry. And, this does not take a lot of technology. This is using Microsoft's Power BI, but you could also use Tableau. There are plenty other products that will, work off a database and give you these great visualizations. You don't need a team of coders to deploy these things, but it's gotten such a great reaction because it's so easy to use. You don't have to go through a long list. You're able to filter and get to exactly the types of cases you're looking for. We've done this in a number of different areas. It's a good user experience. Push relevant content. LinkedIn has a great way of showing me what I want to see. Partly from the things I choose, but the algorithms go from there. We try and do the same thing. When COVID started, our team started generating a news flash that went out to our attorneys 3 times a day. And we were tracking things like school closing and mask requirements and all the executive orders and pushing them out to our attorneys, as I said, 3 times a day. And a lot of our attorneys have taken these news flashes and, they'll see something, it'll give them an idea to call a particular client impacted by one of the new executive orders. Or some of our attorneys just cut and paste and send them to specific clients. So we kept this top of mind. It was interesting when sometime over the summer, we dropped down to issuing the news flash only once a day. We got attorneys emailing us saying, hey, did I miss the morning news flash? It was really good. It made me realize that they were actually reading these things and expecting them. This was highly relevant content and we pushed it. Similarly, over the last couple of months, we've recognized the need for information about vaccines. So we're pushing that content out. There's this whole new issue that's arisen about what we call the wandering worker. A lot, over the past year, millions and millions of workers are now no longer working where their employers are based. And the tax implications, the workers' comp implications, the wage hour implications are staggering. So we're gathering up this information and pushing out because we identified it as really relevant, not just to a couple of attorneys, but to lots of attorneys. So we gave them the relevant content they need. I would also say you have to market your skills. you have to market your services. You have to be top of mind. You have to, however you can, remind attorneys of what you do, particularly in this age of COVID. They're not running into you in the hall or the lunchroom. You have to remind them of the value you can provide to them. We send out reports to the attorneys that the marketing department helps us put together. Or maybe I think our folks might do this themselves. Just reminding them of things and reminding them of the services we provide and giving them research tips and other tidbits that they can use. This is also something that invariably when we send one of these out, we get feedback saying, oh, by the way, that reminds me, do you have X, or can you help me with whatever? So really, don't be embarrassed, market yourself. Really important, especially in this age of work from home. I would highly recommend, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's, whatever, market yourself. No, going back to my initial premise, we're not going to be replaced by robots. There's plenty of work for us in the future. As I said, I believe the future of the legal industry is bright. We're just going to have to change. We're going to have to change the way we do things. We're going to have to help the lawyers change. Look, librarians weren't replaced by Lexis terminals. As I said before, in my early days of my career, I think we had 2 librarians in the firm. Now we have over 25 research professionals. Admittedly, our firm has grown, but the nature of the work has changed. I tell our attorneys all the time, why do you have associates do basic legal research when our librarians do this for a living? I saw Yarka's on the call. When Yarka worked for us, I would say all the time, Yarka's been doing employment law for 25 years. Why would you not go to her when you need legal research done? Again, this is part of marketing yourselves. You add such value, and you have to explain to the attorneys all the time that this is value that they can translate to their clients. And it's a new way of offering services. With that, I will be happy to take any questions. I'm not
Thanks,
sure
Scott.
how. Maribel, you?
I'll read them to you. Thank you for that. That was wonderful. Very interesting. We have a few questions that came in the chat. The first one is, with the new standards that require an attorney who supervises paraprofessionals to understand the work they do, even if it's highly technical, how do you train young attorneys?
How do we train young attorneys? I thought you were going to go to how do you get the older attorneys to take this on? It's basically, yes, there's greater complexity in the process. There's greater complexity in the substance, but it's no different from the responsibility we've always had to review the work of the associates or any of these other paraprofessionals doing work for us. I don't see that changing. Remember, 38 state bars, and California is the latest, now have a requirement of technological competence as part of the code of ethics. Lawyers can no longer go into court and say, Your Honor, I just don't understand computers. Those days are over. Attorneys have this has to be part of the toolkit. Attorneys have to understand, not only the technology that's available to them in their office, they have to understand how their clients use technology. What are the data stores? How do clients handle information? It's critical, and it's something that it's not only a basic requirement, it's something that gives you a competitive advantage if you understand technology better than your opponent does. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then I have a couple of questions that are related about examples that you showed in your presentation.
Sure.
The knowledge desk, I think it was called, the Google-like search. Does a machine answer the question or a human being?
Great question. A human being. We've looked at chatbots. I know that quite a few firms have deployed chatbots. I don't know, just as a consumer, every time I'm, out in the, online somewhere and I'm communicating with a chatbot, I know it and I don't like it. So we really do prefer the human interaction. Now, that being said, we are developing various processes to make some of the repetitive tasks. I mean, one of the tasks that the team gets all the time is, can you pull this complaint for me? We're developing a process to automate that. We probably do that 800 times a month. And that's a no-brainer. It's boring for the people who do it. And that we can automate. But no, so the triage on the knowledge desk is handled by some of our library assistants. They do the triage, and then they know where to find so much information. They know our databases, they know our search engines, they know how to find. We ticket everything in ServiceNow so that we can also look and see if a question's been asked before. But they also know how to escalate. They also know how to escalate to more senior librarians or KM attorneys, or even subject matter experts within the firm. They get a complicated question about background checks. They know which attorney is an expert in background checks. But no, we want human beings not only managing the process, but following up. And it also becomes a point of contact. When I first started knowledge management, I had a managing director who was skeptical of technology, and I would try and license software, and he'd say, no, just hire a knowledge management attorney. And at the end of the day, he was absolutely right, because in our firm, knowledge management has a face. It's the 25 knowledge management attorneys I have spread around the country. It's not just a piece of technology. It's not a website. It's not a portal. It's people. And that has made the adoption and acceptance of KM very, very easy.
That's great. And then another example that you showed in your talk was the Littler Newsflash
Yes.
alerts. Could you speak a little bit to how the content in those news flashes are generated?
Sure.
Are they searches, or do people curate them?
A little bit of both. We have searches that are run. We use a product called Visual Ping, which you can train on various websites, and it will bring you, like a state labor agency or something, and it will feed you changes to those websites. It's been a game changer for us. But we have all sorts of searches set up, and then we have a group of people who are following the news. It's interesting. Back in the spring, a news flash came out, and at the top it said Congress passes the CARES Act. And I quickly went on CNN, and it didn't say anything. And about 5 minutes later, it appeared on CNN. So Betsy Camarada, she scooped CNN, and I asked her, how'd you do that? She said, well, I had C-SPAN on, and I leave C-SPAN on all day. So it's a combination of way we generate. It's really been very challenging. But we've had to expand the normal tracking we do. We basically track every labor and employment legislation or regulation on a daily basis, and we have clients who want us to do that for them. So we just had to expand. I mean, we had to track school closings. COVID hit employers in many, many ways. And when you had areas where schools were closing down, in the early days back in March, employers needed to know that. So we started tracking it, and that was really hard. We also, we use Statescape for a lot of information, and we have quite a few services that we subscribe to.
Great, thanks. And we have one final question. It should be a quick one. How many librarians do you have on staff?
None.
Not library assistants. Okay. None.
Yeah, no, we don't have librarians. We have research professionals.
How many research professionals do you have?
That's a great question. I always say it's about 20. The total team is about 25. You see, we have the research professionals, and then we have people who do strategic work. We have people who do project work, so we sort of break them up into teams. But we also have legal writers, and we have legal researchers who are lawyers. So it's, and then I have the whole KM side of the house. The total team, and we also have a client training group that's part of our work. The total team is 65. I think on the research side, it's probably about 20 to 25. I don't know, Christine's on the call. Can you text out the answer if you know, Christine? And yes, and I see this question, do research professionals? Not all of them. We do have quite a few that do have JDs. We have a lot, most with MLSs. And then again, our legal writers and our research attorneys typically have JDs, and we have a career path. So, we've had a few people who start out as research attorneys, then move up to legal writer, and then become KM counsel.
And one other question came in: why the aversion to the word librarian? Has the term become out of date?
Okay, Christine says we have 23 on the I don't have an aversion to the term. I just think when people hear librarian, they think of a library. They think of the physical place, and the physical place has, disappeared. And I just think I just think research professional, librarian suggests you're managing collections, physical collections. It just, to me, calls up things that don't fully explain the value of what you do. You are a professional. I'm on a quest at our firm to eliminate the term non-attorneys. Most law firms have attorneys and non-attorneys. I raise such a stink every time I hear someone use that word. We have attorneys and we have professional staff. And so I really, it's not that I don't like the word librarian, it's just I like the word professional better.
Great, thank you. Yes, I think so. Okay, so it looks like we're out of questions and we're 7 minutes past time anyway.
Oh,
so,
sorry about that.
Oh, no, thank you. This was very, very interesting, and the questions kept rolling in. So thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. It's been really great hearing from you.
You're very welcome. It's been fun. Thank you all.
Welcome. And Dahlia,